Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are. And welcome to the team project presentation of the very first two-time zone Southern Hemisphere Space Studies program, co-conducted by the International Space University and the University of South Australia. My name is Göktuğ Karacaloğlu. I am the program director of the SHSSP, and it is my great pleasure today to be the master of ceremony of this prestigious event and address you from the SHSSP Mission Operations Center, located at the ISU Central Campus in Strasbourg, France. As many of you, I believe, followed, we had started this program 5 weeks ago, where our 33 participants representing 11 countries had been virtually allocated to their 3 space habitats: on Earth, on the Moon, and on Mars. During this 5-week journey, they were tasked to work on a single team project, which required them to explore how space can help in the prediction, mitigation, and communication of the bushfires. It is always a challenge, but also an amazing learning opportunity to work with diverse and international teams, where you have language barriers, different cultural norms, people with different levels of experience. Well, as part of such a team, it is your responsibility to hear the voice of each individual and learn together. But in this year's program, the challenge was much greater than that, since each of our participants was only virtually connected to the rest of the team. And if that was not enough, they all have been operating on 2 discretely different time zones, which is 9.5 hours apart from each other. That is, for the last 5 weeks, ladies and gentlemen, some of our participants have been starting their days as early as 1 a.m. local time in the middle of the night. In such a challenging context, I am extremely proud that our 33 participants have done a fantastic job and produced a very high-quality report and an executive summary to address how space assets and technologies can help with the bushfires. In the meantime, here at the SHSSP Mission Operations Center, we have tried our best to support them with many supplementary activities, including daily seminars, interactive workshops, and project-specific activities. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank the chair of this team project, Eric Dahlstrom, the project assistants, Camilo Reyes and Anisha Rajmani, and all the other TAs and experts who have made incredibly valuable contributions to the team project work. Today, on their last day of the SHSSP21, at their celestial habitats, I should call, we will be tuning in and listening to our participants as they walk us through a summary of their analysis, findings, and recommendations. Maybe a quick note here on what to expect. As part of the SHSSP curriculum, many times we emphasize the importance of storytelling and public outreach. So to get your message across to your target audience. In that regard, we have also asked our participants to demonstrate this learning as part of their final team project presentations. This is why what you will watch will not be a half-an-hour PowerPoint presentation, but rather a more interactive session where our habitat teams will use the power of media technology available to them. So on my second screen, I can already see the presentation team excitedly waiting for me to pass the floor on to them, which I will do in a minute. But before that, I would like to also acknowledge the 2 sponsors of this team project, Lockheed Martin Corporation, and the 10 to the 9th Plus Foundation. Without their generous support, none of this work and collaboration would have been possible. I would like to also extend my thanks and appreciation to our distinguished guests who are with us at the moment following the presentation, and will be challenging our participants with their questions at the end. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to now pass the floor to our SHSSP outpost, where our MC, Sam Page, is ready to take over the floor. Sam, it's time. It's all over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, I've put a lot of effort into the video presentation, so I won't say much more, but yeah, look, I hope you all enjoy it. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Samantha Page, and I'll be your MC for this presentation. Before we get started, and in the spirit of reconciliation, the participants of the Southern Hemisphere Space Studies Program for 2021 and the University of South Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Our team project this year is Space and Fighting Bushfires, with the primary focus on how space assets and technologies can be applied to better predict and mitigate bushfires and their impacts. As many of you already know, this program with the International Space University is interdisciplinary, intercultural and international. So we're already in a good position to collaboratively problem solve this challenge. We use Australia's 2019 to 2020 bushfire season as the case study. Our goal with our recommendations are for them to be applied worldwide. Our team approached the project from 3 main topics: predict, mitigate and communicate. Our presentation will contextualise the importance of the project through an interview with Bella's mum, Shay, who is a firefighter. We will then present what is currently happening in Australia to predict, mitigate and communicate bushfires, and then we will follow on with our recommendations of what the future could look like using space assets and technologies. So far we've talked about the what and the how, but the most important question is why. Why do we want to use space assets and technology to better predict and mitigate bushfires? And the why is because we want to save lives, save assets and save the environment. For some of you, it might be a bit of a shock to hear that environment is the 3rd priority. But this list of priorities was told to us by firefighters that have fought season after season. What this highlights to us, and what the firefighters need from us, is to create change in human behaviour at the community level. How can we use all this information and technology to make the community better predict and mitigate their own risk, the risk to their lives and their assets? If the community can look after themselves, it leaves the firefighters to prioritise the environment.
Hi Mum, how you going?
Hi Belle, I'm good honey, how are you?
Yeah, good.
We were went deployed with our tanker, which is from our own station.
Yeah.
So we supplied two firefighters and our truck, because we knew our truck really well. We were there for each deployment was for about 7 days.
Okay.
And we did on some days, not all, about 16 hours out on the fire ground. We've got all our PPE gear. We've got our truck.
Yeah.
We've got the truck that has sprinkler systems on it. Stopping this fire front from jumping a main highway.
Yeah.
And it was going really well, and then the wind direction changed. We were getting like ash flying over the road and starting to spot fires behind us. So we're fighting a fire front looking this way, and you look over your shoulder and there's a big bushfire establishing behind you. But sometimes when you've got those fast running fires, you just get out of there as fast as possible. So we put up a backburn, sort of ringed the area. The wind direction was playing havoc on us. It was a catastrophic day. So with a catastrophic day, you've got high air temperature and you've got high winds, and the winds are unpredictable. They can be coming at you at one direction, then all of a sudden they just change. We have shelter in the truck.
Yeah.
We've got sprinkler systems, we've got water, but that only lasts about 12 minutes.
Yeah.
But of course, a flashover goes over pretty quick. It just depends on how hot the fire is. The climate's hot, like you know what our summers are like it was 40 degrees. We even had one deployment we were on was about 46 degrees, 48 degrees. That was the one we went to at Mollymook over on the east coast of New South Wales.
That's really hot.
And yeah, just driving the tanker over, we had the fire curtains down, the aircon's going, and it just was not working at all. You're confident that you're in a safe spot. Your commanders know you're safe. Then all of a sudden it changes and you shit yourself. So I would say, lives, assets, and environment. The environment, like we suffered a drought. Armidale were in, if they didn't get rain in January, their town was going dry. That was it, no more
so
water.
that was the other issue. When you're in a drought, everything's extra dry.
Well, where do we get the water from? So we couldn't get any water from the water hydrants, the fire hydrants. So we'd have to, and then the dams and the channels are empty because there's no water.
Yeah.
So we're having to, where do we get water to fight fires? So any little bit of water you'd see in like a turkey's nest or a farmer's dam, it was almost like gold. Because I hate to think what we breathed in that day.
The 2019 to 2020 East Australian bushfires shook the world. They were the most severe in a record. 33 deaths occurred, many of them who were firefighters. Further estimated 400 deaths and 3,000 hospitalizations occurred following smoke-related air pollution. 300,000 homes were destroyed and $10 billion were accrued in financial losses. The destruction to wildlife and environment is still unimaginable. The 2019 to 2020 bushfires were an anomaly. The environmental, atmospheric, and maritime condition created an emergency state that firefighters have not seen. However, as stated by the chair of Royal Commission into the Bushfire Emergency, Mark Binskin, unprecedented is not the reason to be unprepared. We need to be prepared for the future. The 2020 Royal Commission into National Natural Disaster Arrangements made several great recommendations to enhance Australia's ability to better respond to bushfires. Some recommendations focused on space. However, the report did not focus on space-related technologies. In this report and this presentation, we're going to outline how space technologies can aid bushfire response.
Bushfires travel over large distances at incredibly rapid speed. Early detection of better prediction of fires before they occurred allows for a greater protection of lives, assets, and the environment. Current fire prediction capabilities using space asset stretch over a few days to a month before the fire season. Our prediction timeline encompassed the time frame of 12 months prior to ignition, offering authorities and communities adequate time to prepare. The significance of the prediction timeframe is supported by the State of the Climate 2020 report, which noted there's been an increase in extreme fire weather and the length of fire season across large part of Australia since the 1950s. Earth observation data from multiple sources is crucial for accurate bushfire prediction. These sources include weather analysis, fuel load and its moisture content, pairing Earth observation with remote sensing technologies, and availability of data further supports fire location accuracy. There is a plethora of satellite data. Regions outside Australia heavily rely on space capabilities to predict bushfires. These space assets are not yet fully implemented in Australia. The causes of fire vary. Fires generally start through lightning strikes, 82%, due to current climate change, accident 40%, arson 4%, or other reduction burns 1%. There is no way to predict accident or arson, but we can attempt to predict lightning strikes. Infrared imagery can easily detect temperatures level, which can be used to predict the probability or intensity of lighting. Satellite data in the form of sea breeze and gust fonts are also allowed meteorologists to predict location of thunderstorms. Despite initiatives such as media campaign, radio announcement, billboard warnings, public awareness and preparedness for bushfire threats remain low. The process around mitigation also differs between states and the various stakeholders within those states. Early on our project, we learned that we need to adapt to live with bushfires. Frontline firefighting carries significant personal risk, such as visibility constraints, fatigue, psychological stress, delay of time critical data from lost communication, oxygen deprivation, dehydration, and other stresses. The suits worn by firefighters across the nation may be adequate to support basic firefighting operation, but does not have sensor-based technologies features of generating real-time data. Current burnover protection technologies for firefighting vehicles are effective in less than 50% of historical burnovers, resulting in firefighters' injury or fatality. Fire Response and Land Management Agency fall under the jurisdiction of the state and territory governments. These are charged with the responsibility for the protection of life, property and the environment. The federal government is an overarching system, providing emergency management and coordination support in form of training, public awareness, scientific and technical assistance. There is not national bushfires and land management policy. To support the system, effective and reliable communication is critical, especially during emergency, high-risk situations. Stakeholder engagement with Indigenous landowners in bushfire-affected areas is critical to managing and mitigating the effects of future bushfires. In the 1920 to 2020 Australian bushfires, over 84,000 Indigenous people were estimated to live in affected areas. Government and emergency service agency and the public depend on communication to make decisions during high-risk emergency situations. The analysis of the current state has set us to split our problem across the three key pillars: predict, mitigate, and communicate. We performed several rounds of research across the interdisciplinary domains of people, process, and technology, in conjunction with a series of international subject matter experts, eminent lecturers, and ISU staff. Once gap has been identified for each of the three domains, we work across team to reach consensus on a list of recommendations. Passing over to our colleagues Zoe and Miguel to talk you through this recommendation.
To identify the future state of wildfire management, we split our focus on three areas: predict, mitigate and communicate. However, in investigating the next steps, we found the recommendations are cross-disciplinary and will be presented as such. To start our investigation, we started at the point of ignition. Being able to predict the point and position of ignition can allow quicker response times and reduced fire spread. One potential research field is the investigation into the prediction of lightning by using satellites with specific sensors to focus on lightning formation, such as infrared cloud top temperature, cloud-to-cloud and intra-cloud lightning. This would go further than Earth observation and observing ignition sites and would look deeper at the source. Before ignition, one of the ways we can prevent bushfire spread is to create a natural barrier that stops or slows down the fire. We can do this by cutting off the fuel source of the fire and doing cold burns in the dry season. However, whilst some areas in Australia have historical data that can be used to identify areas to burn, numerous issues such as cross territories, lack of historical data, or exacerbated weather and season changes from climate change can lead to these areas being unknown. Fire is not inherently bad, since it can create new growth in the bushland. However, it is the interactions with people and property that can cause loss of lives, livelihoods and distress. Therefore, at-risk areas must be identified. These are areas which inhibit high fuel load, low moisture content, are uphill and near to settlements. Utilising satellite data from shortwave infrared and LiDAR can produce a 3D picture of the terrain that can be fed into a GIS to find these areas. Data collected can be combined and algorithms created to calculate bushfire probabilities, and this information can be given to the responsible authorities. This information can be used to build an end-to-end mitigation plan where a risk assessment can be built at state levels and contribute towards an early warning system. Identifying these at-risk areas allows state planning to budget for services that could be required for fire response. This resource management could be from ensuring that there are enough firefighters, that water bombing helicopters are on standby, or ensuring that there is a common practice throughout. One statistic to note is that an Australian community-based study in 2010 revealed that only 43% of participants had prepared a personalised bushfire action plan and would likely delay or refuse to evacuate under bushfire threat, thereby compromising safety. Ensuring that people know the risk can allow individuals to plan for pre-fire activities, but also prepare an evacuation plan if needed. All of this is not possible without a data infrastructure that can support and host the data. Instead of stitching together information and creating models, one host can look at the complete picture as a whole and give updates. By having one host, the timings for simulations can come down to live updates that can be passed on to firefighters and the supporting teams. This intelligent predictive model will be able to improve over time, making simulations more accurate.
The following 4 recommendations are: first, to have a national bushfire management and cultivate a cross-communication stakeholder environment. With this, the organization in national level should assist with coordinating resources and developing standardization. This organization may also act as a financial vehicle for investment in space technology. Moreover, the Australian Space Agency hosted a series of workshops to understand how key stakeholders can provide support in bushfire disasters. Trainings like this should be encouraged. These trainings can be expanded to international collaborations to adhere to agreements related to fire management. Finally, the space-based technologies shall be employed in collaboration with indigenous stakeholders, incorporating their traditional ecological knowledge. Second, we need a national bushfire emergency application. Therefore, the implementation of the Australian Fire Danger Rating System has to be expedited. Also, the new Australian warning system has several improvements. However, the second level of warning, watch and act, creates confusion to the people on what are they supposed to do. The wording should have a clear, descriptive message on what is the user supposed to do. On the other hand, the centralized data has to be shared and analyzed to enable real-time communication to all the stakeholders. This data can be linked to a national emergency and bushfire application, ensuring key messages get to the general public and to the emergency teams. Third, use space-based life support systems and materials for firefighting protective equipment. With this, we can reuse principles of the astronaut health monitoring system, like incorporating sensor-based technologies to enable real-time incoming and outgoing data feeds. Furthermore, we can utilize thermal protective materials from spacecraft for hardening of the fire trucks. On the other hand, we cannot rely on early evacuation. Therefore, it is proposed to have thermal sheltering facilities with environmental control and life support systems. Fourth, we have to fortify communications infrastructure to increase bushfire resiliency. Here we can have a more evenly energy distribution network to mitigate the power loss in the communication towers, implementing kind of like a smart grid with some power banks included. Furthermore, we can have heat-insulated housing for non-structural components and hardware of the ground stations. On the other hand, all land communication infrastructure may fail. Full blackout. The current ad hoc solutions for these emergency scenarios are not accessible to the general public. This limitation is overcome by a direct communication path among non-modified phones and a constellation of satellites in LEO. In conclusion, space technologies can help to predict, mitigate, and communicate the bushfire scenarios. Finally, we need to improve empathy awareness towards bushfire so we can all foster a better future. This can be done through tailored virtual reality experiences with artificial intelligence and space assets. And on the other hand, the school system has to promote the STEAM subjects as well as an inclusive educational package for bushfire awareness. The change starts in the schools.
There comes a time where you may begin to question what price can you place on your life, your livelihood, your future, your cultural heritage, or even the place you call home. This is the question that those that have been tragically affected during the 2019 to 2020 bushfire season would have been thinking when the answer to that question was taken away from them.
Taken by Voyager 1 in February of 1990 as the spacecraft was departing our planetary neighbourhood, it turned around for one last look at its planet home, our pale blue dot. At the end of every day, we're humans living on a planet we call Earth. We are compounded by challenges every day, whether it's natural disasters such as floods, droughts, earthquakes, or even pandemics. One of the most significant challenges for us here in Australia, and for others globally, is the onset of bushfires, often causing widespread damage to our homes and communities, and far-reaching environmental, ecological, and economic impacts year after year.
Throughout our journey, we have come to realise that whether we are attempting to predict the onset of bushfires, whether we are trying to mitigate the impact of bushfires, or communicate to coordinate how we respond to these bushfires, we need a new transformational way forward.
Leveraging space assets and technologies lets us unlock value from a perspective that is literally out of this world. Space in our day and age represents a paradigm that humans can use in so many ways to better itself. In our case, this has been bushfire prediction, mitigation, and communication. So to conclude, when you ask yourself how space assets and technologies can be used in the fight against bushfires, this is how.
As a group of individuals brought together by our common passion for space, it probably comes as no surprise that our team project reports with several recommendations demonstrating how we feel space assets and technology could make a key contribution to the challenge of bushfire management in Australia. We recognise that much of our research and recommendations may repeat previous work and conclusions already reported in this area. We hope that we also provide a few fresh and innovative ideas for the stakeholders to consider as they decide how best to deploy their resources in this battle to save lives, save assets, and save the environment. As a team, we have also learned from each other during this process. Us, as the hosts here in Australia, have openly shared our first-hand experiences of the effects of bushfires in this country. For those participants from distant lands, they responded by immersing themselves in the literature, absorbing new knowledge, and offering fresh ideas and alternative perspectives. I hope you have valued this presentation, and I look forward to assisting and directing any questions you may have for our team. Thank you.
Wonderful summary of your team project work. Congratulations to all the members of Habitats Earth, Moon, and Mars. With that, it is now time to get some questions from our assessors. And I very well know that all the participants are excited to receive these questions and address them. So I would like to pass the floor back to Sam now to kick off and moderate the Q&A session. Sam, please tell us more about how the Q&A session will work, both for our guests on the Zoom call and the guests watching us online over YouTube. So once again, over to you.
Lovely. Thank you, G2. I guess I would love it if any guests have some questions to put their hand up, and I'll call you out for you to ask your question. Neve, thank you.
Fantastic presentation. Thank you very much. I was particularly affected by that footage of Bella's mother talking about their first-hand experience of the bushfires. How did that affect the rest of you when you were putting that presentation together?
Oh, the general question. Bella, would you be happy to start that response?
Yeah, I got quite, I don't know, I'm still sort of, even just thinking about it again now, I'm getting quite like, sorry.
Yeah, I was the same. It was very moving, so very brave.
Yeah, just sort of like, it sort of just re-sunk in how intense the whole time was, I guess. And yeah, and it's like coupling it with the videos and some of the ones that Mum took as well. Yeah, including those, it just sort of, it just re-sunk in how, hard it was on us too, as like a family, I think.
Very brave, very brave, and thank you very much for adding that to the presentation. Very impactful.
Does Travis or Andy want to expand on that before we move on to the next question? Or do you have a question yourselves?
I was just going to say, as someone from the other side of the world, I found this one of the most touching moments in the class, and suddenly totally drawn into the project. I think it really bonded the whole class and really drove home the real consequences of this and what it's really like for these people fighting the fire. So that for me was the moment when the whole team came together to really work on this project. It was a really poignant moment.
Thank you, Andy.
I just wanted to add, even during the program, there was a bushfire that broke out in Adelaide, and some of the participants had to relocate, because their suburb was coming under threat. That's something that so many Australians, so many people around the world, but it seems a particularly common threat here in Australia, have to deal with. And so every time we see these kinds of footage and hear these accounts, I think some of that trauma, even if it's relatively low level, returns. The village I grew up in quite often comes under fire threat multiple times throughout my childhood. That happened, and in later life I was working as a journalist when it was happening again, and I was reporting on it from sort of down the hill in a major city. So yeah, it's something that hits home, and when you hear those accounts, they always bring it back.
Thank you so much, Travis. Philomena, I see your hand.
Thank you very much, Sam. Very seldom am I speechless. I just wanted to address this, what we're all experiencing perhaps now, the whole notion of what I see as a firefighter being equated to an astronaut, because they go into very dangerous, unknown places and situations with courage that is natural. And I think the question I have for the group is, that's what I draw, that a firefighter, the way you want to see the technology of the suits and the equipment used to be brought where they have more sensors, they have a better ability to use data. My question is, when did you realize that? When did you see that? When did you understand that boots on the ground is what this project is searching for? At least that's my interpretation from the beginning. So that's my question. When did you see as a group that you needed this boots on the ground type of data from a firefighter? Thank you.
I'll direct that question to Dash, but I think that was a bit of a Dash and Sam moment, like as in me, Sam, but I'll let Dash start first.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, definitely something that came up between the two of us as we discussed that. It was really during the course or the program itself where we realized that we've got the 3 pillars of predict, mitigate, and communicate, but without ensuring the safety of those frontline workers, we can't get either of the 3 pillars working. So that emphasis comes back to protecting the firefighter, protecting their own livelihoods, because after all, they are saving everyone else's lives. So putting that spin on it, we kind of realized that we can come up with predictive technologies or communications, but if we're not putting the life aspect back on the table, we're kind of missing something really critical to the bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely, Dash. And yeah, the train of thought that I came from was we were learning everything about satellites, and then we were learning about life support systems, terraforming Mars or the moon. And then I thought, how if we apply, this is space technology, so how about if we apply this to Earth? And I looked at specifically fire trucks or sheltering facilities. But in that conversation, Dash was also like, how about the firefighter suits? And we're like, absolutely. This, yeah, and just flipping that sort of thinking. So if those 20, those few astronauts that are up in the ISS, their lives matter, and they're so far away from us, firefighters on the field, they matter just as much, if not more, to an extent. But thank you. And I see Ruth, your question.
Thank you very much, Sam, and congratulations to the team. I was really touched by how you went from, the individual example with Shay and Bella out to the pale blue dot where it's the whole globe. And my question is what you have found out about how space data is shared, how it unites us, and also how we can build on that big data maybe to help solve not just Australia's issues, but maybe help other countries around the world.
Who do you think, who best could answer that question? Sorry.
I can jump
Robert?
in, Sam, if you want.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I'll go and then I'll pass to Robert. So I think from a data perspective, more so is that's one of our findings that individually the data for, like lightning strikes, etc., it does its own job really well, but together there is nothing. So as much as we did focus more on Australia, we did find that there were other data sets and there's other data that we can combine to then make it a global thing as well. But of course, it goes back to there is nothing for it right now. So I think as a central sort of starting point, having everything together and then looking at it. And, from there, who knows what you can achieve with it, might be able to help with things like we're seeing in Texas right now, like it could be all weather. So I'll pass to you, Robert.
Thank you.
from my perspective, from Ecuador, we have the mangrove tree that grows over there. And mangroves are an important part of the ecosystem. And the protection and how the plant performs is very important as for CO2 reduction and the creation of new habitats. So for me, this exercise, this project was a very important lesson to learn about the space assets. What can it provide? How it interacts with the stakeholders? How we can take that information with the local communities, and how we can definitely make a difference on the environment. So all these lessons that have been learned here and have been shown are a clear roadmap that can be applied for any other type of subject. So this is a great project that can definitely be socialized in other parts of the world. And that's going back to your comment, how we can definitely bring it forward to help more people.
Thank you, Robert. Andy, I do see your hand up, but I will move on to another question if that's okay. I've got a couple of people asking questions. Is it Michael? I think you're the next one.
Yes, in fact, superb job. I have attended so many of these TP presentations that seem to be more fascinated about technology in orbit than about how that technology affected people on the ground. And you did a wonderful job of dealing with the nexus between technology on orbit and real problems on Earth. So congratulations on that. My question really is, did you have a chance to look at the way in which the space research into using robots in cooperation with astronauts for future exploration missions might have applications for firefighters on the ground and for improving the quality of space data by having machines do some of the ground truthing necessary for a good satellite data analysis?
Ooh, we've got a couple of sort of experts in that area. If we're looking at AI, Sami or Yara, and I think Dash worked on a bit of robotics as well. But who feels most comfortable with answering that question?
I can start, Sam, if you would like.
Cool.
And pass across to Sami. So yeah, thank you for that question, Michael. There was an aspect as we thought about it from the human perspective. So given that the risks of the frontline firefighters and what they would have to go through is, to use better words, unprecedented, so that they don't quite know what's going into it. So I guess one of the concepts of coming up with that fire suit part was trying to integrate the machine into the human. So the aspects of human machine learning. So interacting as one, but letting the machine make all those decisions about, I guess, what the human wouldn't be able to do in those emotive circumstances. So from that perspective, we did think about how that could work and how that could fit together. There's a lot of decision making that it would need to do, but from that perspective, it would be a bit of a maturity exercise. So start with sensor-based technologies to help us with the workforce management perspective. But as it would go on, you'd expect humans and machines working side by side to get that safety perspective really under wraps.
Sami, would you like to contribute anything to that?
I think Dash did go through that pretty well, but I think from the AI side of things, probably links back to my similar comments around data. So having that as a starting point and then tying that into robotics, like we're only going to learn over time using AI. So it's only going to be as good as the data we feed it. And if everything is still disparate, then we may not be able to tackle it as effectively as we do want to do. So combining everything and having everything central from, I guess, a starting point will allow us to only, improve our prediction models or the AI side of things.
Thank you, Dash and Sami. Oh, Andy, you've got your hand up. I don't want to keep knocking you back. What would you like to say?
No, just adding into this conversation. So we had this amazing conversation with the Canadian Space Agency representatives about a program in development called WildfireSat. And the amazing statistic that it's 3% of the numbers of fires cause 97% of the devastation. So any technologies that we can bring to bear that will reduce those numbers are going to have a huge impact on the amount of damage and the economic impact. It really feels to me, as we did our research, we kept finding so many elements of research into how we can look at fires and the damage using different types of remote sensing instruments. It really feels like we've got such an amazing foundation. It feels like we have a perfect storm building of how we can attack this if we all start collaborating even more around the world and working together to fight this problem.
Thank you, Andy. Brenton, you have a question?
Yes. Firstly, congratulations to the team under the circumstances for producing an outstanding report. I've had the pleasure of listening to these for 9 or 10 years now in situation in Adelaide when the program's been run physically. And so I'm delighted by the quality of the work that you've done, given this new model of running the program. It really is quite inspirational in a way. I have one small question of detail just because I'm interested in it, and a broader question. The question of detail is about the lightning research and how you made some interesting comments about what might be done in terms of prediction, other things. How do you actually see that helping in mitigating the problem? So that's the detailed question of interest. And the broader question is, we've seen some attempts at using technology in various ways for firefighting, and it's been, I would say, a mixed bag in terms of success of those. Some, for example, some communication platforms that have been developed have fallen over terribly and not helped at all. There've been recent things with the use of drones and other things for surveillance, not quite at space level, of course, but that have done some good things. So the broader question is, did you have any time to explore the risks associated with any reliance on space and the technologies that are available?
Oh, some very broad and detailed questions there. If everyone who thinks they could answer the question about lightning put their hand up, I'll direct people. Zoe, thank you.
So I'll answer the first part of your question, which is kind of how do we think that predicting lightning will actually help the firefighters? And then I will pass on to Saf, who did some of the research on the more detailed side. So for how we think this will help, I mean, in terms of international collaboration, we have the International Disaster Charter. But however, this only gets triggered after a disaster is already started. So the fire has already taken hold and there are already boots on the ground trying to attack this fire and prevent the loss of lives and assets. So what we're trying to do is to detect these fires as early on as possible so that they haven't spread into these larger disasters. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to almost identify when they're small enough to tackle rather than when they actually have the potential to cause massive damage. So I will pass on to Saf now, who did a lot of the research behind how we actually could go about looking at this lightning. Saf, are you there?
Hey, Saf, are you all right?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, I was talking with mic off. So regarding this, thank you, Zoe, for answering the question. To add to that, we currently have a lot of technology and space assets to detect bushfires, but in addition to detecting bushfires when at a very early stage, we also want to predict before bushfires even take place. And in our research, we mentioned the key elements that lead to bushfires, and one of these is lightning. We find through our research that lighting is one of the most ways that ignite the bushfires. So there is the idea of having space assets that detect lightning when it happens cloud to cloud or inter-cloud lightning, which is not easy to detect from the ground, but with space assets, it is very doable. And there's a successful example of such space assets that is called the GLM, but it covers the Western Hemisphere. So we can use similar technology to cover the Australian region. And Zoe can also talk about the LiDAR technology and how it can help to detect fuel moisture and dryness, which also a key element that can help us predict bushfires before they even take place. And with that, we can you collect all of these data and use some algorithms to come up with the probability of having bushfires at certain areas. And then we can prepare and have a plan for when they take place.
Cool. Thank you, Seth. I know we're nearly out of time. We've only got a 20-minute session, so we'll try and answer that second question about the risks to communications and everything like that. My thought was around Ryan and his thoughts around critical infrastructure. Would you like to talk? Or Olivia, you had your hand up in regards to this topic. So who feels most comfortable? Shall I start with Olivia first?
I was just going to talk about our reliance on telecommunications. In Australia, telecommunications are a bit of a area of development or area in development. And as well, there has been a big part of bushfires was a loss of communication because of the cellular towers were in the fire-affected areas. In our communication research, we were able to find a small startup that was able to eliminate the on-the-ground communication and send messages from satellites direct to your mobile phones. For now, it's just a 2G communication. But it's enough for emergency response. So you're not going to be scrolling on Instagram through that internet connection, but you're able to get messages about where to go, what to do, and those very critical information. So that was a very successful I guess research in development, and we're really looking forward to learning about how that develops in a few times where they get more satellites and see how they can develop this into a more reliable constellation.
Cool. Ryan, would you like to talk?
Yeah, yeah. Look, I'll be quick, and it's a great question, Brenton. I think it's about the promise of technology meeting expectations, and there's always seems to be a gap there. For me, my comments would be that it's around improving the speed and the accuracy. So the information that you can get to the right people at the right time, it makes a difference. And what I think, trying out different technologies and ensuring that they're layered and using a mixture of passive and active systems, so that technologies and structures and the whole structure of how the governance works as well are linked in a way that there's passive and active systems that are linking, and they work together so that they're layered with primary, secondary, and alternate types. So that you've got different levels that are working, and if one goes down, you can revert to another one that's proven. If that one goes down, you can revert to another one. And I think that's a good approach to adopt forward fringe technologies into proven firefighting strategies.
Cool. Thanks, Ryan. I'm conscious that we're coming up to the 20 minutes. Do we have time for one more question, G2, or should we end it there?
Yes, you can go 5 minutes over time, no worries.
Okay. All right. We'll move on to the next question then. Philomena, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I sent the question to Miguel, so hopefully maybe he's ready for this. He mentioned in his, when he was speaking, that it all starts in the schools. So I want a flow chart. Tell me, how does it start in the schools? How does your project address this initial, this important starting point?
Great. If Miguel feels comfortable, but also we have Olivia who did work on a bit of education as well.
Definitely. So we were working on the communication part. So it's the outreach to the people. And we had an open session with two firefighters. One of their main goals was to make the community aware of the problems of bushfires, so everyone will take more care of it. So how it starts in the schools is by promoting the awareness of bushfires, and we have come with a technological solution that also involves the space assets, which is a virtual reality experience. So you can be immersed in a bushfire, and we use the satellite data and the GPS location to make it a very personal connection. So if I'm here in Barcelona, and now if I use this virtual reality on an app like Pokemon Go, I can see my surrounding on fire and create an emotional bond. So I'm more aware of what it can happen. So this is how we use the space assets and also through 5G technologies. Then for the part that is directly to the schoolers, here is where Olivia, she's a teacher, so she's very aware of this.
Yes, thank you, Miguel. You did really amazing speaking about the AR and VR, and raising the empathy is definitely a very important factor. What I looked into was the lack of the practical skills in regards to bushfires. So we had in this program, we had a connection to around the world experience. So we're able to use experiences from people, for example, from Lorenzo from Italy, and us in Australia, we used an example of an emergency high school kind of training. So in Lorenzo speaking about his earthquake training, and you get that in schools in Australia. It's really common for primary school kids to do survival swimming lessons where they go in their clothes full in and swim in the water fully dressed to really be prepared for falling into a water without being able to swim. That doesn't exist in Australia yet. For bushfires, and we know that bushfires are becoming a more common problem. So one of our suggestions or recommendations was to have a very practical base skill, how to prepare your bushfire plan, what roads to take, and specifically to each address to be very customizable. And the hope is that your students and the kids are bringing that knowledge to your families and further creating that ripple effect that spreads on through the community. And there's also not a lot of research. The research into bushfire specific emergency and training for disaster education is very under researched. There was a really great study from UNESCO about like the flow chart that you were talking about, but it's now 10 years old, and we know our research moves really fast. So I would probably recommend to look into this for very specific disasters, because each disaster comes with its own problems and its own solutions. So that would be probably my recommendation, but it is an area. So if anyone here wants to do an educational research, I'd definitely come along and help you out.
To add to Ruth's about global question, and also Brenton about this like global outreach that we've been looking for. We will look education in the whole world, and empathy is something that we can use as broad to tackle the problems like pandemic and also now with bushfires. And from another technology related part is that when we, as Olivia mentioned, when we were researching a technology that everyone has, that is an outreach broadband, is mainly phones, right? So that's why we didn't tackle any solution for satellite phones that are like 1,000 euros, or like these like balloons that they only cover a very specific area. So we were looking for the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is reaching as many persons as we can. So that's why we also look for a very easy solution of an SMS from a satellite to a phone.
All right, thanks so much, Miguel. I think that's the Q&A session up. Thank you so much for all those questions and brilliant answers there, everyone. Yeah, it's just amazing how much we've learned in these last 5 weeks. So I'll pass the mic to G2.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sam. Thank you very much, everyone. So, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of final academic deliverable and the event of SHSSP21, the team project presentations. I would like to once again express my sincere congratulations to all our participants and their supportive chair and teaching associates for this amazing work, which just happened in 5 weeks. I well know how hard you have worked across the time zones for the last 5 weeks to make this possible. I hope that each of you is proud of yourself, which you truly deserve. I also want to once again thank our team project sponsors, the Lockheed Martin Corporation and the 10 to the 9th Plus Foundation, and all the experts joined in with their questions. With that, as the director of SHSSP21, I hereby declare the success of our team project, and it is now time to, come back home from your celestial bodies. So we will sign off for a brief, 24 minutes now, and be right back at the closing ceremony at, 8:30 a.m. UTC. Yeah, 8:30 a.m. UTC. So for the audience following us on YouTube, please follow the address isunet.edu/live, the isunet.edu/live, once again in around 15 minutes, which will take you to a different YouTube link for the next event. Until then, see you soon and stay healthy. Take care.